Hello and welcome back to Gamesplay. Technically, I'm your host. Today we're taking a look at some of the bases that I've built in 7 Days to Die. I'm going to take a shot at rating them to highlight the good and the bad. With that said, let's get started. This is the first base that I built that was actually effective. And look, if you spent any amount of time playing 7 Days to Die and researching base building, then you've probably built something that looks like this. Basically, it's a box on a pillar. So really, what even is there to say about this box standard vanilla-ass basic bit? It just works. It's a pillar, at least 5 blocks high with a fighting position on top. You build some kind of way for zombies to get up and over to your fighting position, and you place some combination of blocks to keep them at bay, but close enough to be able to swing at them. And why does it work? Because of zombie AI. Zombies are both smart and dumb. When they know where you are, they're pretty good at figuring out the best way to get to you, unless it involves a ladder that's 2 blocks off the ground, or other blocks that they can't make sense of. In the case of this base, we keep it simple. We give them a path up to the fighting position by which we can control their flow. The stairs are designed to maximize access, and the pole bridge makes them walk single file, which causes some amount of zombies to fall off and have to cycle back around. Once they reach the end of the bridge, they get to this pointy block that limits how much space they have to stand. This means you get the fewest number of zombies possible to fight at any given time. From your side, you can beat them, stick them, shoot them, etc. And it's spacious too, mainly because this is the design I use when playing with my friends, and man, do they like to complain. Aside from making sure that they've got enough space to move around, one of the problems we ran into was that zombies would fall from the bridge and start attacking the pillar rather than going back over to the stairs. So there is a core reason that this happens, which we'll get into later, but usually you can fix this by pinging them, but that's hard to do without good visibility. That's why I added these wings on the side of the fighting position with bars all around. That way you can see the base of the pillar, and also you can use these windows to repair from the front of the base. You can also repair the front-facing blocks from the fighting position, and the reason for that is kind of important. It's because not all blocks have the same collision models. In fact, let's break it down. Bars are a common type of block used to stop movement, but that you're also able to see through and shoot through. What's interesting about the bars block is that you can shoot through it without actually worrying about the bars. As far as projectiles are concerned, the bars don't exist. You can't melee through them though, but shooting is just fine anywhere you aim. Scaffolding ladders are another common block type, and they seem similar, but they're entirely different. They have a complex collider that interacts with everything, including projectiles. You can still shoot through it, but you have to aim at the part that isn't solid. So which one's better? Depends on what you're trying to do. Bars are great if you want to shoot through them, but they do block the ray casting used when repairing. That means that you can't repair blocks on the other side of the bars. Scaffolding ladder blocks let you repair through them so long as you're aiming between the rungs. You can also throw or drop objects through them, but more on that later. The downside to using scaffolding ladders is that some zombies can actually squeeze through them if you're using it as a barrier, and you also have to keep in mind that zombies can use the sticky side of the ladder. That means that they can use them to climb. There's also a third type of block, the railing block. Railings let you shoot through them and repair through them. So why don't we just use railing blocks if they're the whole package? You can, but I find the blocks hard to see through. They actually have more bars than the bars block. Let's see what that looks like at the fighting position. You can see here that there's a mix of blocks that we're using. I use the bars block in front with the scaffolding ladder in between and the railing block in the back. This is a combination that I found makes it easiest to keep the front block repaired. We also have these pole blocks here and here, meant to keep zombies from getting squeezed in over the railing, but that doesn't really work. There is probably a way to do this using some kind of weird block, maybe the ramp 8-meter block, one of these, for example. However, it does make it difficult to melee through the window here. There's probably a good way to deal with it, but I haven't found it yet. The last bonus feature on this standard base is the grenade chute. It's pretty dummy proof, but you can still blow yourself up if you're not careful. Throwing grenades works fine, but pipe bombs on the other hand have kind of a weird shape and they can sometimes get stuck, usually in the most inopportune moments. So what I recommend is to prime the location with unlit pipe bombs, right? They can't blow up if you don't light them. And then once you're ready to ignite them, pull the pin on a grenade and throw it down and just blow the whole thing up. There is actually one more thing I want to talk about, and it's this weird cage looking structure on the top of the base here. This is meant to stop jumpers from getting onto the roof, Like I said, I use this base with a party, and sometimes some of my friends like to stand up on top of the base to shoot at targets. And every once in a while, we'll get a jumper who will jump from the pole up onto the roof. So this is meant to stop that. The additional crisscross of ladder blocks is also meant to stop spit, which can get through. And so like I was showing before with projectiles going through certain types of blocks, spit will go right through railings or bars blocks, but it can get stopped by a scaffolding block so long as it hits the solid part. And by crisscrossing them, I kind of increase the chances of that happening without inhibiting visibility too much. Additionally, this also lets you place spike traps on the pole, which can be helpful early on if you're willing to lose the XP in exchange for dealing with a maybe overwhelming horde. Alright, so let's go ahead and rate this base. I'm going to rate them using a scale of 1 to 10 based on the following categories. 1, complexity, or how complicated it is to build a base, with a 1 being a 2-block stack and a 10 being a luxurious castle with more ornamental blocks than functional ones. 2, regular effectiveness, or how well it works against screamers and wandering hordes. 3, horde night effectiveness, or how well it works on horde nights. And finally, 4, resource costs. This won't be a rating, but it'll factor in. In the case of this base, it gets a 4 for complexity. It's not hard to build so long as you know your way around blocks. The only real sticking points are the chutes and the wings, and really you can get by without them. In regards to regular effectiveness, I'll give it a 6. It just works, and so long as you upgrade the materials to concrete and steel, it'll take anything a screamer can throw at you. Just make sure to stay on top of repairs, especially when irradiated show up. For horde night effectiveness, it gets a 5 for being dead average. Granted, it's hard to do a rating here because it really depends on the day, right? A day 7 blood moon, yeah, this will do it. Day 70 blood moon, if it's upgraded, it will, but is it really good at it? I wouldn't say really. All settings being default, it should hold up until pretty far into the game, at least in the Pine Forest. Like I said, it does require upkeep, and it's got some problems, but overall it's fine. Alright, and in regards to resource cost, so I did include the cost of building like a support platform, right? That's where you keep all of your stuff, because that's usually the way I build bases. It didn't occur to me to keep those numbers separate, so sorry, but here's the cost. So it's 393 wood blocks, 274 cobblestone blocks. Not very expensive. You do have the added cost of wood from upgrading cobblestone blocks, but honestly, this is something you can easily do before the first blood moon night. It's going to take you a day and a half maybe if you're doing it by yourself. If you're playing with a party, you can finish it pretty quickly. Overall, and despite its name, it's really nothing special. I think if I had to rate it, it'd just be, it'd be a 5. This is kind of the bog standard by which I will measure everything else. And with that, let's move on to the next build. And speaking of nothing special, here is the Pine Forest Special Plus. This is what the Pine Forest Special turned into after something like 60 in-game days. It's not all good, but I think it highlights the iterative base building process. So the first major change was meant to answer a simple question: why are zombies attacking my pillar? To fix this, we dug a pit of at least 11 blocks deep to avoid triggering what's known as destroy area mode. To understand what that is, we'll have to talk about zombie AI again. Alright, when zombies fall, they will sometimes enter destroy area mode, in which they attack random nearby structure. This is usually going to be the front of your base. However, if a zombie falls and is 11 or more blocks away from the player, then they don't enter destroy area mode. Why? Because it really doesn't matter. What matters is that it's useful to make sure that zombies fall more than 11 blocks, 13 even, but more on that later, so that they don't attack any random blocks and instead keep cycling along the path you have set for your base. The next problem was that we were getting too many Zeds at the fighting position, so we added sledge turrets to knock some of them back. This was a direct response to getting overrun on one of our horde nights. We were still learning the game and had set the max to 64 zombies, and with 4 of us in the group, we kind of set ourselves up to get rolled. Between these changes and upgrading materials to concrete and then steel, we were no longer getting overrun, but we weren't exactly killing zombies quickly. The last problem we ran into before moving on to other base designs was that we weren't sure how to deal with demos. Demos have explosives strapped to them, which will detonate if you hit the green button on their left shoulder. First of all, note that our sledge turrets are a block below the pole to avoid accidentally triggering demos. To deal with demos, we tried creating a maze to give our sniper more time to spot them and pick them off with AP rounds. I used whole blocks for creating the maze because they have a force field effect. I think the container block also works and is actually better. Using these force field blocks instead of walls meant that we don't lose any visibility. It actually worked okay, all things considered. We occasionally triggered demos, but not so much that we lost our fighting position, though with how it goes, it really is only a matter of time. Alright, so how will its ratings differ from the Pine Forest Special? Somewhat significantly, actually. For complexity, we're going all the way up to 7. It's not a hard build, but it is time consuming. You're definitely not going to have anything like this by day 7, but it is supposed to be a kind of evolution to the Pine Forest base. In regards to regular effectiveness, it gets a 7. It's about as effective as its predecessor, but now it does a little damage thanks to the sledge turrets, and the maze means you can often deal with screamers and wandering hordes before they even get to your fighting position. It also gets a 7 for Horde Knight effectiveness. This isn't an AFK base by any stretch. It's not even particularly good at killing lots of zombies fast, but it significantly increased our survivability over the old design. What really helped was the sledge turrets. We had hit a point where we were getting massive hordes of strong zombies that we couldn't easily put down, and the sledge turrets went a long way toward reducing the number of Zeds we had to deal with at one time. I suppose the maze helped by slowing the flow, but I don't know how much credit I can give it. Resource-wise, it's kind of expensive. There are probably a lot of blocks that don't need to be concrete, but you still have multiple walls and a steel floor on the pit to absorb a demo blast. Unfortunately, I once again factored in the cost of support platforms for some reason, but I think you can cut the price by a third and get a pretty close value. Alright, and for the resource cost, it was 1,685 concrete blocks, 11 wood blocks, 500 cobblestone blocks, and 80 steel blocks. So it's lucky 7s across the board, but I can only give it a 6 overall. I'm realizing now that I should be rating simplicity instead of complexity, but I already recorded the first segment, so oh well. Either way, it's a 6 because although it does have improved survivability, it's a lot of effort to build for very little payoff. This base isn't doing much to help you mow through hordes of Zeds for big XP and lots of loot bags. For that, we're gonna need to change our strategy. Right off the bat, I need to make sure I give credit to JustRob, link in the description, for coming up with the concept. This is my take on it after trying to make his design work. The crux of the boom base is that if grenade shoots are good, then what if your entire base was a grenade shoot? Essentially, you lob explosives from your fighting position that's hanging over a pit that's 13 blocks deep. 13 blocks? But I thought you said 11 blocks was enough. I did, but there's more. Zombies can land on top of each other, and they're about 2 blocks tall, which, if you do the math, reduces falls to 9 blocks. So if you just go 2 blocks deeper, then that should ensure that Zeds fall the full 11 blocks and don't enter destroy area mode. So how does the base work? The idea is that Zeds will fall into this pit, which is lined with a mix of concrete and steel blocks. Once you get enough of them in there, you drop pipe bombs and grenades, blowing them up for as much as 20,000 XP in one go. You might be asking yourself, why would zombies fall into the pit? To answer that, we'll have to talk about zombie AI again. Zombies are trying to get to this ladder behind me so that they can climb up to your fighting position. Luckily, they have a valid path. But that's a gaping pit, you shout at me incredulous. Please don't yell. But yes, you're right. If you've watched Jawoodle's content, then you already know where I'm going. Like I said, this is a valid path for zombie AI, and it has to do with the combination of half blocks and the wedge 60 block. However, before I explain that, let me first show you the method used by JustRob. Now, this isn't going to be the spec. I recommend you check out JustRob's video for that. Really, I recommend you check out JustRob's video because it's a fun video. Instead, this is meant to demonstrate how this setup works. It's a smart design, and even though it isn't my preferred build, it does make for exciting blood moons. Alright, do you see this pit with weird little spindly pillars hanging over it? Now look at these thicker pillars stacked on top of each other. To zombie AI, these are the same. I told you they were dumb. Essentially, you're creating a path up to these ladders here, but by using these tiny pillar blocks, you can make it almost impossible for a zombie to actually traverse the path without falling into the pit. They can sometimes make it across though. And in my experience, the whole thing results in traffic jams, which means the Zeds will sometimes ignore the pit and start attacking other stuff. Granted, and like I said, I didn't build it exactly the same as JustRob. Instead, I switched to this. As far as I can tell, the Zeds see the half blocks as providing space for them to walk on top of the wedge 60 blocks along here. Additionally, I think zombies can tell if the door is open or closed even when pathing over it. The reason we need the door is to be able to close the pit when it's not Horde Night. To sum up, zombies think they can cross the pit to get to you, but fail 99% of the time. Spiders can sometimes jump across. What you do is you let them pile up in the steel-lined pit before loading it up with explosives and lighting them up. Also, quick note, upgrade these half blocks here to steel. Zombies tend to get stuck at this spot and will take swings at them. Usually giving the Zeds a quick tap at range will get them to stop, but stronger zombies will tear through concrete pretty fast. So how does the Boom Base stack up against the Pine Forest Specials? The Pine Forest Special. You know what I mean. The Boom Base does okay. I give it an 8 for complexity because it's kind of a pain to build. You have to dig a pit that's at least 14 blocks and line the bottom of it with steel and concrete. Doing that without breaking your leg can be tricky. You also have to build an auxiliary fighting position for dealing with screamers and wandering horde. I mean, you don't have to, but I don't like using the pit for anything but Horde Night. More on that in a bit. But for that reason, I have to give it a 6 for regular effectiveness since it's about as good as the Pine Forest Special setup. Just remember to close the garage door so that Zeds can't fall into the pit, and destroy the ladder leading up to your fighting position to break that path. In regards to Horde Night effectiveness, I'm giving it an 8. The Boom Base is close to being really good. Don't get me wrong, you can kill a lot of zombies pretty easily using this base, but there are some pain points. First, melee weapons are not an option with this build. It's all munitions, meaning you better get stocked up on ammo and explosives. A lot of explosives. It also helps to put some points into Demo Expert and pick up some Atom Junkies to beef up your explosives damage. That said, you really have to make sure that you nuke demos so that they don't explode in the pit. That means dropping enough explosives to kill them in one blast. Even with a layer of steel, you can only absorb about 2 demo explosions before the blocks are gone. Even if you succeed at that, the Zeds will still crowd up enough that they'll start whittling away at the blocks in the pit. I think if you build the pit to JustRob's spec, this is less likely to happen. Either way, once they get through the wall, they'll start burrowing into the dirt. This can potentially be solved by making the pit larger so that they're not so close to the walls, or just putting more layers of steel and concrete. Neither of those options is ideal in my opinion. Here's the real sticking point. Come morning, you're going to have some amount of Zeds in the walls, and dealing with them is not as much fun as running down to collect all of your loot bags. So after each Horde Night, not only do you have to do cleanup fast enough that your loot bags don't despawn, you also have to reapply layers of material to the inside of the pit or risk that it keeps widening out. That means that the resource cost numbers are a little deceptive. To build this base, you're going to need somewhere about 249 wood blocks, 500 cobblestone blocks, 230 concrete blocks, and 56 steel blocks. Either way, you have to factor in significantly higher maintenance costs than what you'd see in other bases. Overall, I give the base an 8 for the big XP numbers. Boom Base has some problems, but there's promise in the concept. Which brings us to the last base in this showcase. This base design is a culmination of hundreds of hours of play. That's right, I'm new to 7 Days to Die. It's meant to not only solve Horde Night challenges, but to challenge Horde Nights, which is just a fancy way of saying that this base is built to kill Zeds. Either way, the point of this base is to answer one question. Can I gather all the Horde Night Zeds in one place and blow them up? I guess that was the concept for the Boom Base, but I'm trying to do this without having to dangle over a deep pit that I have to rebuild every blood moon. In other words, I'm looking for a bit more control. To achieve this, I had to find a way to group zombies in one place, hold them there without letting them do too much block damage, and then put them where the explosives are. I wasn't really sure where to start. I had previously messed around with using doors for pathing. This was mainly focused on early game builds that would allow me to manually drop Zeds when they became overwhelming. Results were mixed, but I realized that I could make trapdoors, and using grenade shoots I could control when Zeds drop to maximize the effect of explosives. That said, regular doors weren't going to cut it, and how would I keep the Zeds from going ham on my fighting position while I wait for them to pile up? What made the whole thing click was the powered garage door and electric fence posts. Initially, I was just throwing shit together to see what worked, but it became obvious pretty quickly that stun locking Zeds with electric fences meant that I could gather as many as I wanted without incurring too much block damage. I could then use the grenade shoots to prime a spot below the trapdoor and then click, drop the Zeds, and blow them all up. And because any base worth designing is worth over-designing, I added blade traps, dart traps, and turrets, all accessible from the fighting position. This means repairs are pretty easy. All of the controls are right by the fighting position. They've gotten a bit complicated as I've had to add safety features. I have a switch for arming the base after you've turned on the generator, and a switch for enabling the motion sensor that operates all of the automated traps. Except for turrets, which are on their own switch, mainly because I want to be able to turn them off so that they don't trigger demos. I also have turrets down one block from the kill zone to reduce the chance of that happening. And then finally, there's a switch that controls the trapdoor. The rest of the base's configuration is somewhat arbitrary. The stairs work, but using these poles to control zombie flow is entirely untested. I just knew that I needed to allow for more Zeds, but I could have done just as well without the pole blocks. Either way, I do want to highlight something that my friend came up with, redundant pole blocks using the T-pole. This design is more effective in bases that have just the one pole bridge where it's a single point of failure, but it helps in any situation. It means that the whole operation doesn't fall apart just because Zeds decide to take their anger out on a pole block. So shout out to my buddy, he's like an engineer or something. I also add visibility with these wings, but I think they're just making it possible for cops to land their spit shots. So much so that the switches kept getting hit, so I had to kind of put them in cabinets, I guess. I do like this ramp though. I hate it when zombies start crawling, which makes it hard to get a hit on them from the fighting position. By using these 60-degree slope blocks, you can backtrack a little to drop in height and easily land shots on any crawling Zeds. Finally, the base is 10 blocks off of ground level, but I also dig a small trench to increase the drop height to 13. I also have this steel pad here just in case I don't quite nail a demo. And that's the everything base, named for having everything in the kitchen sink. So how does it stack up? For complexity, it's a 9. This rating could change as I build more complex bases, but this one in particular requires building stairs and 2 pillars to a block height of 10, digging a trench, and wiring electronics with switches and motion detectors. It's way more moving parts than any of the previous bases. For standard effectiveness, I give it a 9. It's not an AFK base, but you can pretty easily deal with anything coming your way without even turning on the blade traps and turret. And if you do use the blade traps and turrets and even your own robotic turrets, it's a good way to deal with nights in the wasteland where you're just getting this constant stream of Zeds coming your way, especially if you have feral senses on. For Horde Night effectiveness, it also gets a 9. Again, it's not an AFK base, but this base fucks. Just watch it in action. It is a little expensive in regards to resources. I tried to balance that out by using cobblestone where I could, but by the time you get to this point in the game, it's probably easier to just mass produce concrete than it is to have to go farm clay for cobblestone. So here are the costs for this specific build. 640 concrete blocks, 650 cobblestone blocks, 108 steel blocks, 10 wood blocks, and then everything down here as well. And I'm only going to talk about the stuff that's absolutely essential. The things that are absolutely essential are the electric wire relay, the motion sensor, the switches, the 3x2 powered garage door, the 2 blade traps, and the engines and generators are probably the required things. Everything else is kind of extra on top, including the turrets, although the turrets do make quite a big difference. So what's the overall rating for this base? Well, firstly, this is a perfect example of the iterative process I was talking about, in that it shows my iterative process. Like the boom base, the everything base is a concept build. It's not just a place to hole up, there's a plan to have it do something, and it does, even more effectively than I could have hoped. But is it done? No, there's a bunch of open issues with this build. Why am I using 2 poles as a bridge? Are the turrets well placed? Hint, they're not. Are the dart traps being effective? There's a lot of fine tuning that needs to be done, and I have no doubt that there are better designs out there. Maybe this base is actually mid. But compared to where I started, this base easily scores a 9 overall. It's still not an AFK base, but it manages Zeds effectively at high game stages, and it's a blast to operate. The everything base is my current go-to base, but it's not the last base I'll build. And that's the video. Before I get to thanking people, I'll say that my rating system could use some work. In particular, resource counts are complicated. There's opportunity cost between upgrading block versus building block, and it can be hard to say how much fortifying a base needs because that depends on game stage, max zombie count, etc. I'll work on that for next time. In fact, I'll iterate. Alright, first I'd like to thank my girlfriend for her unwavering support. I'd also like to thank my friends and my brother for their complaints, their ideas, and their patience. I'd also like to thank the Fun Pimps for not releasing 2.0 on time because that could have really messed up the timing of my video. Finally, I'd like to thank sleep deprivation and caffeine, name a more iconic duo. And I guess I should thank my heart for not exploding. Oh, and I should definitely thank you, the viewer. Thanks for watching my goofy little video. If you had a good time, hit the like button. To see more content like this, subscribe and hit the bell so that you get notified whenever something new drops. And with that, I'll see you guys next time.